Hi everybody, this is Tina with Rehatch Designs. Hope everybody's doing well. I am here for my Tim Holtz Tuesday, and hopefully you'll see it on Tuesday. If not, it'll go out early Wednesday morning. Anyway, we're going to do something, I don't know, a little bit interesting, but not that earth-shattering. I'm going to use some things that we made together, and we had made these collage sheets together, and I will link that video in the description box. But they're kind of neutral, and they have a lot of texture to them. And we're just gonna make 3 tags today, and because they're kind of repetitive, and I just want to show you my process and how I use these things that we make. And we're going to be using some Tim Holtz stamps and some texture paste with this, and you will see how I do this. And I'll also be using a few other things that are new. And what's great when you do these is that you'll get to see all the texture and the background still. It'll be kind of still, you can see why we did it the way we did it. And all I do is just put a light, one light coat of gesso, white gesso on it. So anyway, I'm going to cut these. Each one of these little pieces is a little over 9 inches, so I'm going to do it about 3 1/8. And I'm going to make 3. They don't have to be the exact same size. It's just I like them to be around, 3 by 6 is about the size. I think it's a good size tag. It gives you something to work with, and it can easily fit in a journal. So I am just going to kind of make these into tags, and I'm not worried about them all 3 being about the same size. It's just they probably won't even all go in the same journal, but I just kind of want to have them in that shape already, because when I put things on it, then I can kind of tell where everything's going to be, rather than make them, while they're still a rectangle and then have parts of it that I'm going to cut off and things like that. So here I'm just trying to remember which one of these I put on the top to do this, so I can get it even. Anyway, so after we make these tags, we're going to go to the next part, which is basically we're just going to be putting texture paste on these. And I'm going to be using the Ranger texture paste, the opaque matte. I'm not using the crackle this time, just because there's already a lot of texture on here because of the collage that we did. And you can't really see it that well, but when we do the other part, you'll be able to see that even more texture. So I don't want to get it too busy. So anyway, so now we're going to go to the next part, and we are going to use some stencils, and I have 3 different stencils here. And I am just going to go ahead and do, I don't think it really matters which one's which. Anyway, I love these smaller stencils. I buy them all the time, just because they fit, a 3-inch tag, and that's usually what I end up doing, is something around that size. So usually 3 by 6 or 3 by 5. So and anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and just do that, and it will cover most of the tag. And this texture paste dries pretty quickly, but I am going to dry it. But I really prefer to let it dry naturally, because it can kind of puff up a little. I don't mind that too much, but if you want it to dry completely flat, the best thing to do is let it just dry naturally, and it doesn't take very long to do. So I'm going to go ahead and do this next one, and this is the beehive one. And it's a bigger stencil. It's a half stencil. But honestly, I usually don't stencil the whole thing. I just do parts of the tag. So having smaller stencils or half stencils work really well for me. And I think I got these in like the Stampers Anonymous, things that you can get from Joann's. So anyway, so I'm going to do that. And I messed it up a little bit, but you know what? It's not going to matter because unfortunately when we get done, we're going to be covering a lot of that, but it all adds up to a lot of texture and a background and a mixed media tag. And I don't know, I love making these simply because they're really special, and I think when you put them in a journal, they're very different, and hopefully, if you're giving your journal away or selling it, people appreciate all that effort that you put into them. Anyway, so this one I'm just doing the flowers, and I think this one actually turns out the best. But in any case, like I said, we'll be covering a lot of it, so you won't even see it when it's done. So I am putting all of my stencils into a little bath of water because if you don't do that, what happens is you will definitely ruin your stencils. So that's what I'm going to do. So now I'm going to let these dry. And now that they're all dry, we're going to go on to the next step. I'm showing you there where it's a little puffy, but that's okay. I don't mind it. I like that distressed look, so it doesn't matter. But just to, and this is the satin glazing liquid that I'm using. It's from Golden. And what you use that for is you can use it for adding to your paint to make it dry slower. Artists use it when they're painting. I'm putting it in this little plastic dish, and now I'm going to take some vintage photo and put a few drops in there. And I'm just going to get a paintbrush, if I can find it, and mix that up. And that is going to make a glaze, and it will go on top of our tags. And it's going to vintage them up a little. And what's going to happen is the texture paste is going to grab more of it than the tag. The tag will grab some because it's got gesso on it. And the really cool thing is that it will go into like all the little cracks and crevices of your collage paper also. So now the texture paste will grab more of it because it's a little bit more porous. So then that'll just kind of bring out the texture that you put on. And I know it looks like a big mess, but anyway, you let that sit for a while. Believe it or not, it's not going to dry too quickly because that's the whole point of the glazing liquid. Now it would dry faster, if you had it mixed with paint, but it still gives you some time to work with it. So, and really all I'm doing is making sure that I'm getting in all those little indentations and stuff so that the glaze catches it. And so we're going to just do that to all three. And I mixed enough for all three. Now, if you want to, sometimes I'll do it like in a little jar or something with the top, and then this stuff will stay good, for quite a while. But for the most part, I just usually mix what I need. So it's pretty much the same process. And I just go ahead and keep going, making sure I get all my little spots. And it's not a big deal if you miss some, because you can always go back in and add more, But basically, what I'm doing with the brush is just smushing it all in the little crevices and stuff. Okay, so the big thing now is you want to let it dry a little bit, but not too much. I'm taking a a wipe, and not a super wet one, and I'm just going to go over this, and I'm going to take off what I want to take off. And I'm taking more off the background, and that's what we're going to be left with. And I think that's really cool. And if any spots I took too much off, I just go back in and add it and take it off. And that is going to give me a little bit more definition on the texture, and it also is going to make it look more vintage than it would if I, had just left it with the white. Honestly, you could do this by itself and not even do the other steps, and I think they look really cool. Just doing that. I don't know. I think that they make just really fun looking tags that way. And it will dry matte. It won't be shiny. So I know it looks kind of glossy right now, but it will be a matte finish when it's completely dry. So, and like I said, see, I'm going back in and I'm just adding spots that I needed to. All right, so now what I'm going to do is we're going to clean this up a little. I'm going to go ahead and dry all of these so that we can get on to the next step. And I'm going to go ahead and add a backing to this after I dry them. And I'm just going to use, this is just a brown paper bag, just a regular old lunch sack. And the reason I'm going to do that is that that's what we're going to be using on the front too. And it'll kind of coordinate. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to glue each one of these down after they're dry, and I'm going to glue the backing on, and then I'm going to sew around each one of them with some black thread, just for looks, really. You definitely don't have to do that. So here they are. They're all dry, and I've put the backing on it, and I've sewn around them. So now we're going to use that same paper bag, and we're going to go ahead and do some stamping. I have several different Tim Holtz stamps that I'm going to use, and I also have some black cardstock that I'm going to be using with this white ink, this Hero Art Pigment ink, Hero Hues Pigment ink. You could use any white ink, I'm just going to be stamping with the black archival ink on the paper bag, because that's what we're going to be using. And hopefully I can get them to stamp okay. I could have used my stamping platform and it probably would have worked better, but I'm not really caring if I get a perfect impression. I just kind of want a good impression, It's not really that important to me because it's not supposed to be perfect. But anyway, I haven't used these stamps before, so I probably will have to stamp twice on this. Usually when you get a brand new stamp, you kind of have to prime it and use it one time at least. Anyway, so I am going to do it again. But I have plenty of paper bags, so we'll try that. And it doesn't really matter that there's any kind of fold lines or anything on the paper bag, because when you see what we do with it later, then you'll see why it's not even gonna be a problem. So you won't see that. Okay, so the second one turned out pretty good. It's not perfect, but I think we can use that. And all I'm going to do is cut around it, not perfectly because we're going to mess with it some more later. And now I'm going to take my next stamp, and it's also a stamp that I've not used yet. So I will say that these other red rubber stamps, to me, they stamp much better. But I mean, they work really well. So I wouldn't be surprised if it stamps well. So the first time. And I'm just trying to use a variety of different stamps. Yeah, that turned out actually pretty good, so I'll probably just keep that. Again, I'm just going to cut it out so we can use it later. And then I'm going to use this Eiffel. I've used this Eiffel towel so many times. I don't remember what stamp collection that came from, but I've had it forever and I use it all the time. And I had to use some glue stick. After a while, your stamps won't stick down, so I just put a little glue stick on the back. So hopefully this will stamp pretty good. All right, so it did. Okay, so then let me cut that one out. And I am not going to really mess with these for a little bit because I want them to dry. And while they're drying, we're going to go and do the other stamping. And I'm going to go ahead and just use the white ink. And this is pigment ink, so it takes a little bit longer to dry. So I always make sure I heat set it. And the words that I'm using is from the Noteworthy set, and I absolutely love it. I love the size of these and the sayings. They just seem to always go well on just about anything. So I use them a lot. Anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and stamp these just in places I can cut them out. And I'm just going to be cutting out rectangles, not a big deal. So I go ahead and I heat set it before I cut them out because I don't like to mess with the pigment ink until I've heat set it. Anyway, so now I'm going to take my little tear ruler and I'm just going to tear around these images that we stamped on the paper bag and get them smaller. And I just want a rough edge. I don't care if they're perfect. In fact, I want them not to be perfect. It's kind of the point. It's supposed to be a pretty shabby, rustic look. The imperfection is what makes it perfect, in my opinion. Okay, so I'm going to get that all torn down. Now you really couldn't stamp directly on the tags the way that they are because they're so uneven that it would be really hard. It would be hard. I mean, I guess you could put it on a stamping platform and try a bunch, but it would be hard. Okay, so now I'm cutting out all of these little the sayings that we're going to be putting on our tags. And I'm just doing them in kind of rectangles and just kind of keeping not a huge border, but a little border on there. So, and I'm trying to cut them reasonably straight. I mean, you know, they're not perfectly straight, but I am trying to cut them, you know, reasonably straight. I'm not tearing those, but we will distress them later. Okay, so now I'm going to take my pieces of paper bag that are stamped on, and I'm showing you where I'm putting them on my tag. And I just cut each one out to barely kind of be behind each of the brown paper bag pieces, but I make sure that I fray them, you know, so it'll stick out behind there. And that's what I was kind of saying. Unfortunately, a lot of the texture will be covered, but you'll still see quite a bit of it. So it's the layers that make it, you know, interesting to me. And that usually happens with the layers. So you end up covering, you know, a lot of it, but that's what gives it all the depth is the different layers. So anyway, so all I'm going to do then is just figure out where my saying is going to fit, so that I know where exactly to put my piece. And now I'm crumpling up my brown paper so that it has a vintage kind of, old look, shabby look to it. And I'm going to go ahead and glue down my gauze first. And then I'm going to go ahead and put my Eiffel Tower on. And I'll be messing with this a bunch, so you'll see me go back with it and deal with it. But that's how I do things. I rip things up, start over, adjust. That's how I do it. I mean, I don't ever usually do things, the way that I had planned. I usually always make adjustments. So now I'm just going to go ahead and kind of cut the gauze a little bit. I want more of the texture to show behind this. And I also think there's too much brown showing on the Eiffel Tower. So I want to make sure that I adjust it with that. And I'm taking off the glue. But I'm kind of cutting the gauze and then fraying it to make sure that it looks, not like I cut it. I want it to look like it's just, sitting behind there. And it's very random. So that takes a little bit of doing, and then I'm going to go ahead and re-ink it because I tore it, and so I have to put a little bit more ink on there, and then I decide I need to tear it again, ink it again, and so I work with this a little bit, and then I kind of cut the very top because I'm afraid if I try and tear it that it's going to probably go ahead and tear too much. So anyway, that's how I mess with that, and I finally get it the way that I like it, and that's kind of how it goes. I mean, you have to be willing to adjust and work with it. So that would be my number one thing that I would tell people. And now I'm going to go ahead and distress all of these little sayings here as I do them. And I'm putting some brown paper behind it, but I'm going to go ahead and distress the edges because it has kind of like a little bit lighter core, and I don't want you to see that. So anyway, so that's what I'm going to do. And I go ahead and tear my paper so that it fits just a little bit behind the black. And so now I'm just going to position it at the bottom. And you could have put this at the top if you wanted to, or not even on all, but I don't know, for some reason I think it needs to be on the bottom, and you'll see why, because I'm going to add something to the top later, and I think it kind of offsets, so that's why I'm doing that. And so I'm just going to glue this down. I'm using a lot of glue, mainly because everything's so textured, but I'm using really probably too much glue. But anyway, so that is that tag, the first. And then now we're going to go ahead and work on the next one. It's basically the same process, just matter of just fitting everything where it needs to be and putting the gauze and pretty much going from tag to tag and, inking and crumbling the paper just to give it the old look. And on the gauze, I always make sure that I kind of like stretch it out and fray the ends a little bit. This gauze, I just bought this. I think it was on Amazon, and it was white, and I just sprayed it with some alcohol ink and vintaged it up a little bit. So anyway, I'm just going to go through the same process with this one and make sure I get it on there to where we can still have room for the little saying. And I got a little bit too much glue on there, which is what I always seem to do. I'm very heavy-handed with the glue. Especially when I have stuff that's textured because I want it to stay on. So anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and get my brown paper ready for the little saying, the Be Fearless, and ink around it. And go ahead and distress the edges. And I think that's important because the rest of it looks very distressed, so you want it to kind of seem like it goes together. So anyway, that is that on this one. And then we've got the very last one, and it's going to be basically repeating the same process, cutting out the gauze, and then stretching it to how the size we want. And you kind of have to fiddle with it to get it, to fit the way that you want it to fit. You don't want too much hanging out, but you want it, to be able to see it. So I'm going to go ahead and distress my little saying, get that ready to go. And honestly, if you were doing these tags, you could just do them, each process separately in a row, and you could really crank out a lot of these pretty quick. It seems like a lot, but now that's if you already have done the collage. Because the collaging takes a little time, it has to dry and all that. But I usually do my collaging whenever I have just too much paper saved up, and then I'm like, okay, I need to do something with that. In fact, all these little extra brown pieces of paper will go in my little bin, so I'll have to do something with this stuff. A lot of times I do that just as I'm watching television or something. I find it very relaxing. So anyway, so now all I'm going to do is just put this last little saying on and make sure the edges are a little bit torn, because I don't want them to look perfect. Ink them up a little bit. Oh, way too much glue on that one. But so that will be the last one, and then we're just going to do a few more things and we will be done. So I'm going to ink around all of these. I haven't done that. Not a lot, just a little bit, because the edges are all white. And I'm just using Vintage Photo. Okay, so now that I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and get on to the next step, which is going to be just adding eyelets. And I'm just using a regular eyelet here. And I'm just eyeballing the middle. I always do. I probably shouldn't do that because I'm not always great at doing that, but that's what I'm doing. So we're going to go ahead and just do all three. And then I'm going to go ahead and use some twine that I have, because I think it looks kind of rustic and goes with it. And I'm going to do it to where there's going to be like 4 pieces up on top. I'm going to double it basically and then push it through. And so I'm just going to kind of loop that through. And then that is going to give me my little 4 strands on top. And then I've got some black, I guess it's a twine or I don't really know where I got it from, but it's kind of a string. It's a little bit heavier. It's like a cording. And I'm going to tie a little bow and then put a dab of glue so that the knot doesn't come out because it's kind of slippery. And that gives us like a pop of black at the top. And I'm going to do that to all of the tags. Okay, so that is what we have done. There are our tags that we made. And I think they turned out really good. So anyway, thank you guys. And I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.